Radio X presents An Evening in Conversation with Muse.
Radio X.
Welcome to Radio X's Evening in Conversation with Muse. My name is John Kennedy. We are here to celebrate the release of the new album Simulation Theory with the band who have created it. I think we should welcome them to the stage, don't you? Matt Bellamy, Dom Howard, Chris Wolstenholme. They are Muse.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Wow. What a reaction. It's great to have you here. Thanks for coming out and coming in to talk to us. Simulation Theory, the album, it's in my hand as I speak. Looking good. And you've kind of been teasing us with this one, I think, over the last year or so, dropping tracks every now and then, suddenly out of the blue, Muse have got a new song, all building to this moment. And it seems in some ways that you've kind of approached it differently this time. You've decided not to go in, record an album, and then get to work on promoting it and all that kind of stuff. You've just been playing it by ear.
I suppose a little bit, because we wanted to do a bit of recording after we finished the Drones tour. But then we didn't want to completely stop touring, you know. So we kind of did a bit of touring, then we did a bit of recording, put a track out, then went back on tour, and kind of going between those two different elements, I suppose. It was, kind of cool to do it that way. So we didn't really forget about what it's like to do gigs whilst in the studio and vice versa, really.
Yeah, it's been a while since we made like new music whilst in the middle of doing shows, you know. So we'd do like a week on the road, and then we'd like come in and do record like 2 songs maybe or something like that. And also we kind of noticed over the years we have this fan base that kind of doesn't like our new stuff, you know. So basically, and basically like what I've noticed though is like I remember it was when we first time I noticed it was Absolution, right? So we did Origin album. And then we put this song out called Stockholm Syndrome that, like, at the time, I remember, like, you know, I went on the message board and read some comments, and there was, like, people were like, oh, this is crap, this sounds like sort of weird metal or something. And then, like, 5 years later, like, they all love it. You know what I mean? And that same thing's happened quite a lot over the years. So, like, I remember Supermassive Black Hole, when that first came out, it was something that took a long time for people to like, same with Uprising. And so another reason for doing this is because we're doing a big tour next year, and we like the idea of some of the songs coming out early as well to sort of get some familiarity, so when we play them, they're not just, like, totally like, oh, never heard that before, you know?
Yeah, because it certainly seems, listening to Simulation Theory now, it's like, oh, I know this one, oh, I know that one, and they're already hits. They're already doing really well on radio, everybody loves them already. It's interesting because it's quite a stylistically varied record. Do you think that's a result of doing it this way that you've been describing about, you know, doing it between tours, and so your mind's in one place at one moment, and then the next time you go back and record, it's in another place? Or did you want to make it as varied as possible?
Another sort of pattern that I've seen is that we sort of tend to do albums which are more rock-based, and then we sort of follow them up with albums that we sort of try to sort of go outside of that a little bit and experiment with different genres, you know, mixing stuff together like that. The Second Law was pretty experimental. So this album was kind of like, I wouldn't call it experimental, but it's definitely us sort of embracing a bit more of sort of modern sounds and modern production techniques. And trying to find that blend between kind of the instruments that we play and sort of like, you know, modern sounds of synthesizers and programming and stuff.
And so when you would come off tour, would you go straight into record, or will you all break up and go off and go back and reconnect with families and have a rest?
I think it was a little bit varied, really. I mean, there was times where Matt and Dom would just happen to be in London, so I live in London. We'd, you know, kind of make sense to get together as a band, kind of like we did when we were kids, I guess, you know, rather than everything just being, you know, all to do with doing the album. You know, sometimes it's just fun to get in the studio or get in a rehearsal room and make some music, you know.
Yeah, which is what it's all about for you. Exactly. I mean, that always seems to be the crux and the core of what Muse is all about. It's about making music together, that you just like doing.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I got really into the studio this time. It's most I've really enjoyed making an album for as long as I can remember. I think, you know, I almost didn't want to go on the road, you know, I just wanted to stay and just make another album straight away, you know, because I was getting so into it.
But you're recording in a few different places. You're recording in London, you're recording in LA. Anywhere else?
I think that was it, wasn't it? Did we get anywhere else? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's just London and, you know, a bit of Santa Monica, California, generally, yeah.
Yeah.
Nowhere too exotic.
And you have a studio at home, Matt, that's made out of a tour bus. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm very institutionalized. I can't get enough of the tour bus, basically. So yeah, I got this. I actually got the idea from the studio that we did some of this album actually, and we did some stuff on a little bit on drones. It was a Rick Rubin studio in Malibu called Shangri-La, and he's Bob Dylan was on tour once and like left his tour bus in this sort of field basically, and they built a studio around it because it was like Bob Dylan's bus, you know. And so I recorded some vocals on that bus for the Drones album. And I just thought it was really cool because it was, you know, you can just buy a bus and turn it into a studio and stick it anywhere. You know, over the years, I've built a couple of like home studios, you know, and for whatever reason, those homes disappear and and my life changes. And so I've learned to not actually, you know, build studios anymore. I keep my interests mobile, basically. So so I thought I'd make a studio on a bus.
That's very practical. So you move, you can take the bus wherever you go. Fantastic. So the album starts with algorithm, and it's almost like the opening of a film. You know, the way that it starts with this pulse and this sound. And there seems to be a big theme to the album in terms of film reference and a certain era of film as well. I mean, it seems to, and it's kind of illustrated well by the cover. You know, it has this kind of 80s thing going on. And Algorithm, was that written to be that kind of track? You know, to like start the credits roll at the beginning of a film.
Yeah, there's a bit of film stuff happening for sure, and there's also actually, weirdly enough, there's a gaming thing that emerged whilst making the album that sort of occurred to me recently. Like, actually, when the band first got together, like one of the reasons why Don wanted to hang out with me actually was because I had an Amiga 500 with a 1 megabyte upgrade, right? Which is basically it was a really cool computer to have. You know, it was like, you know, great games on there. And
nothing to do with music.
It's nothing to do with music. Basically, he would come around my house and say, he would knock on the door and goes, "Can I play on your Amiga?" And I was like, "Okay, come in then." And so we play on that, and some of our musical, I guess, conversations would have happened around that kind of situation. It's been a long time since I've got into gaming, you know. I've got a kid now, and he's like getting into it, so I started getting back into it.
So how old would you have been when Dom was knocking on your door to play on the Amiga?
Like 14 or something.
Right.
Oh yeah, early school days. But I think sometimes I'd go around there and you weren't even in, but your mum was so nice she'd let me in. And often you would come home and I'd just be in your bedroom playing on your computer, and you'd be like, "What's that?"
That's true.
Drinking tea.
But I got into VR gaming a little bit on this album, and so whilst I was making the album, I was doing some VR stuff, and I was just so blown away with how much it's changed. And I think for some reason that threw me back to childhood a little bit. So back to, like, you know, gaming back in the late 80s, like Ataris and Amigas and, you know, early Nintendo stuff. And that got me into that sort of mind frame. And then it made me think of, I guess, some of the filmic influences that I had in my childhood in the 80s, which probably did influence a lot of my sort of dystopian vision of the future type stuff, you know. And also film music from that time, like especially like synth soundtracks like John Carpenter, like The Thing. Films like Aliens, films like what else? Back to the Future, of course. You know,
Blade Runner.
So I guess something on this album where I wanted to reconnect with the nostalgia of that period and how that period may have influenced me musically and so on. Yeah.
Did you get invited around to play on the Amiga, Chris?
I was the school year below, so that wasn't really allowed.
He was too young.
Too young.
So, I mean, having set the scene with Algorithm, then you leap into the dark side. And, you know, I mean, the dark side seems like such a great Muse title, because so often, as you mentioned, Matt, you know, you talk about dystopian themes, and you know, the dark side obviously spells it out. Is it meant to?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say it's... yeah, that song... Yeah, that song is kind of I guess a lot of Muse material over the years does have a bit of this dystopian theme, sort of anxieties about technology and so on. This album was partly a little bit of sort of an attempt to get away from that, and the first two songs are kind of like the struggle to get away from that, and I think the rest of the album starts to get a lot more sort of fun, more colourful, and a bit more positive in tone, maybe. So yeah, that song can be sort of interpreted lots of different ways. You know, it could be interpreted as kind of like trying to escape from your own anxieties, or it could be interpreted as like being trapped in some kind of matrix and wanting to escape reality. You know.
And when you're putting these things together, you know, with the bus just outside your door, and you know, you want to record ideas, sketches, do you do it all on your own? Do you need to call up the other two? I mean, you were talking, Chris, about how you're in London, they're in London, you meet up, you play music together. And is that where a lot of the songs gel as Muse songs? Because do you save up your ideas, Matt, and then bring them in when you all meet up?
Yeah, I mean,
Chris came out to LA a couple of times. You know, I think I felt like the heart. I felt like the heart of the album happened when we were all together in LA. But yeah.
I think it depends song by song, really. I mean, I think the bulk of the album, you know, obviously Matt makes a start on the songs and gets them to a point before bringing them to me and Dom. And then we did some rehearsals in LA, we did some rehearsals in London, and you know, I guess that's when it becomes a Muse song when we're playing on it. But you know, then there's other songs that I think are much more kind of studio based, where you kind of build up ideas in the studio. Songs like Dig Down, which was done really differently to anything we've done before. So I think maybe on this album the approach was a bit more varied than perhaps previous albums where we'd all sort of set up as a band right from the start,
That's but one of the intentions really, like Drones, that album was really started with us kind of in your basement, just kind of playing as if we were doing a gig, kind of, just using that kind of instrumentation that we normally use. And I think just because we did that last time, we definitely didn't want to do that this time. So yeah, the process was a lot more kind of fluid with the with how we approached the recording. It wasn't traditional in any kind of way. So, and sometimes it's quite difficult to get out your comfort zones. The kind of things that you're so like used to doing in a studio. So it's nice to try and get out of those and not repeat yourself. And if you feel uncomfortable with what's going on in the studio, it's normally heading in the right direction, and so often you've got to be a lot more extreme with your kind of ideas and what you're doing in the studio, because so often if you think something's like a real radical extreme idea, it's not that extreme potentially once it's all done and mixed, so you've got to really kind of step outside of what you are used to doing.
So Pressure is the third song on the record. Where did this come in terms of creating the record?
I'd say this is the most sort of traditional sort of Muse type track maybe on the album. It reminds me of some of the old stuff from Absolution maybe. It was, as we were making the album, I felt like the guitar was not really being, the guitar was starting to become less and less important on this album, but I wanted to make sure there's a few tracks that I still had something to do on stage, basically. And so it was, for a laugh, I joined this group of mates, like a group of expats in LA. We call ourselves the Jaded Hearts Club, playing like Beatles cover songs. And I know the Beatles, like the hits, obviously, but I've never really studied the Beatles catalogue that much. And I took on the role of Paul McCartney. I was playing the bass, basically, and I had to learn all the bass lines. And I was so blown away with how amazing his bass lines were. I had no idea, because when you listen to Beatles records, you can't really hear the bass that well, because it's the way they recorded back then wasn't really bass heavy. And so when I started looking at the tabs and looking online, trying to learn these parts, I was like, whoa, man, he's like playing serious, crazy stuff on the bass. And so with that, with Pressure, I basically wrote it. I'm not sure I wrote it on the bass. I wrote it on just the bottom 4 strings of the guitar, and it was kind of like almost, I was thinking like a Beatles bass line, So I was putting together all of these kinds of parts, riffs and stuff, and it was very much influenced by the Beatles, I'd say. Even though it ended up sounding nothing like that, but I'd say that's where the composition started from. And then once we started recording it together, it sounded pretty like an old Muse song in a way. So, but
it sounds great. I mean, why wouldn't it stick if it sounds as good as it does? Propaganda, track 4, has this amazing staccato repetition.
Yeah, I sort of I've got a speech impediment where when I put P's and R's together, it comes like a pwa pwa. So I said I have to make a song that basically exploits this to the maximum. So pwa 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 propaganda, basically. Yeah, and basically I was driving around in LA, and I don't know where the idea came from. I had my phone, and I sometimes put voice notes in there for ideas, and there is a voice note that we ended up taking the sample from, but it's just me going pop 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 propaganda, and then I start doing like a little beatbox, like all this, and I don't know what it was, but when I was doing that, I was thinking like that is the weirdest, like strangest thing ever. Like if I can somehow get this to work with these guys in Muse, like it'd be hilarious,
And when he brings these ideas to you, and you're saying, Matt, that is just you singing into your phone in the car, making stupid noises. I mean, do you react in that way, or do you think, the stroke of genius?
You've got to have a good imagination.
It's kind of always been that way, I think. I think even going back to, the first album, which probably seems quite tame in comparison now, but I'm pretty sure even back then, I think the first time you played the idea for the bass line for Must Museum, it was like, what is that? That was like, didn't sound like anything from any rock band I'd ever heard before. So I think we've always been kind of used to the kind of slightly crazy ideas that come in, but I guess that's kind of what makes us.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds great, and it's a nice part of a little run of tracks that seem to conjure up groups like Cameo or Prince, or and Timbaland was involved in the making of this album. Which tracks was he involved with?
Yeah, just Propaganda actually.
Right.
Yeah, so we put like a demo together that sounded pretty stripped down, and then we wanted to get like, let's say, a bit more of a complex rhythm section, a bit more kind of contemporary sounding, I guess. And we sent the track to him, and he basically sort of, I chatted on the phone to him for a while. We didn't actually work in the same building together or anything. He was in Atlanta, I was in LA. We were chatting on the phone. And it was a case of he just threw loads of layers of like interesting loops and stuff like that. And then kind of when we got it back, we sort of spliced it together, basically, yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting though, because you have all that going on, and then the bridge is like bottleneck guitar or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is completely different, so you bring in this kind of nice bluesy feel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I did want to use the acoustic guitar a bit more on this album, but I think I started off some of the songs on the sort of deluxe extended version. You can hear like the acoustic sort of demos of the songs, if you know what I mean. But with Propaganda, it was acoustic song, but obviously added loads of cool, sort of interesting stuff to it. Yeah.
Yeah, because the initial little bits of information that came out about this new record maybe a year ago suggested that it was going to be more of a Muse acoustic album, but that still hasn't become a reality. You can only get the deluxe version and get those a little window, a glimpse.
I just get a bit when stuff's so stripped down. I just get a bit bored by it. I mean, like, it sort of doesn't really. But
we always say it, don't we? We're like, next album's acoustic. It's just totally stripped down. But I think you just get a bit carried away in the studio.
Yeah. And I think, but also, as I said, the album's got this long version where, I mean, on all the streaming stuff like Spotify and that, it's all on there. So you can hear the stripped down versions of the songs as well.
Yeah. And then from Propaganda into Break It To Me, which continues this nice funky feel, but more of a funky kind of guitar riff there. Again, Prince, and some crazy bass sounds on this song, I think. So which way round? Did Matt suggest these to you, Chris, or did you say, no, I've got this lick?
I can't even remember how that one came together, really. I think a lot of this album, we kind of, with a lot of the bass stuff, I think we've, in the past, kind of committed to bass sounds quite early on and kind of gone with the setup that we normally use live. And I think on this album, quite a lot of the bass was done, just recorded sort of straight into the desk as clean as possible, so it could be, really manipulated and messed around with in Pro Tools or with whatever effects we wanted to use. So, and obviously there's a lot of synth as well. So, the whole thing of like blending the bass with synths and using effects and trying to make it sound like one thing that's not quite a bass, not quite a synth. It's something that sounds new,
Yeah. And Break It To Me has such a great hip hop feel. I mean, you just did some beatboxing, Matt. I think it's a specialty.
Yeah.
I understand that. Does he come into the studio sometimes and just starts beatboxing, and you this is the song, and you create
that one wasn't like that, was it? That was like a tribal layering thing, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a kind of an idea for we were thinking about, I think you probably played the riff or something, we just, as we do, thinking about what we're going to do. And we thought, well, excuse me, if we just play it as we do as a band, it's probably just going to sound like Rage Against the Machine or something, So we wanted to just approach the rhythm section completely differently, which is why we added this weird-ass synth to the bass. And then I suppose with the drums, it was all just built up with all of these tribal drums that we got in the studio and just kind of built up like tons of layers and came up with the parts and added tons of stuff too, like big Japanese taiko drums and African like tribal percussion and stuff like that. Kind of just built it up in layers really, but it gave it just a much more kind of interesting sound and very kind of hip-hop influenced really.
Body popping, is that part of the equation in the studio? Any breakdancing going on?
You can do a windmill, can't you?
I thought you could do the caterpillar.
No, that's you. No, you're getting me mixed up with you. I've seen you do the caterpillar. Go on.
Oh no. I don't want to embarrass everyone in this room.
And near the end, is that a theremin in there?
There's a theremin.
So I know you like a bit of theremin.
Yeah, and the guitar's pretty simple really. It's mainly just playing this kind of bending a sort of weird sort of augmented ninth chord type thing with a very low B string, I think, and
just
then
an augmented ninth chord.
it's
just a really simple.
Well, no, it's like a Hendrix chord. I mean, like because if you hear the guitar part, it sounds like a Hendrix riff, really. But with all the tribal drums and everything, it starts to sound a bit different. And but the guitar solo was fun on that. That was just I just made loads of crazy noises and anything I could do really, and just sort of spliced it together to create this kind of Tom Morello-esque sort of guitar solo, which I've never really done before.
Yeah, I can see the connection, and it still has a sci-fi feel to it still. I think there's the use of the theremin kind of sounds like the Star Trek theme or something like that. And there's little bits of that throughout the course of the record, I think, which
Did you say body popping? You did, didn't you? Yeah.
I did.
So tomorrow, when the album comes out tomorrow, there's 3 more videos coming out. Yeah, and one of the videos is this amazing body popping dancer for "Break It to Me." And he's like he's amazing. Yeah.
Wow. It has to
Check
have
it out.
body popping. And then you follow that with Something Human, which is such a mixture of styles.
Yeah, that was kind of the odd one out on the album. That song was written as an acoustic, stripped back song. It was the first song written after we finished the Drones tour. Coming off the road, it's a pretty basic song in terms of the lyrics. It just talks about what it feels like to be a bit knackered at the end of a tour and want to go home. You know, it's pretty straightforward. And at one point there, I was thinking that we'd go in that direction, you know, like slightly stripped back and acoustic all the way. But then it changed quickly after that. And then once we found the sort of direction that we wanted, this more kind of synthesized, simulated kind of sound for the album, that song became a bit difficult in terms of trying to make it fit in. So, you know, because trying to layer that song up with synths and stuff to fit in with the rest of the album didn't really work a lot of the time. But in the end, that song took about a year to get completed. And in the end, we got it just about right where it fits on the album, I think. Yeah.
And you're kind of era blending. That seems to be the phrase that I've seen you come up with to describe some of these tracks, which I like. So it's putting different bits of different eras together, but musifying it somehow.
I think we've got, I guess, mentioned that term, but I think it's almost been a bit of a trait of the band historically as well, because we've often mixed, you know, 2 very, you know, different extremes together, where it's like classical music influences and piano, stuff like that, with like, you know, metal or rock. So I think we were just kind of making sure we didn't lose focus of that kind of trait that we've been used to on this album. So, you know, we definitely try to mix, you know, like, I suppose, you know, different styles of music together, or like, you know, very kind of organic sounds with very kind of futuristic or modern electronic sounds. So it's just really kind of, like a thought process that we made sure we didn't lose sight of during the recording.
And talk of Thought Contagion is the next song. Recorded with Rich Costey in LA. Was this one of the earlier songs you worked on, or were there later ones?
Okay, Chris came in, didn't you? We did like that session where we did like 5 or 6 songs in one hit, didn't we? I think it was Thought Contagion was the first one. Yeah, that was the first one finished. No,
that and
but
Pressure
we put the sort of the basic parts down for Pressure, Algorithm, something else.
Dark Side,
yeah. Yeah, there's one session in about 2 weeks where the bulk of the album was sort of put together, but the first song that we finished was Thought Contagion, yeah.
And in terms of, so the title comes from a Richard Dawkins book.
Yeah.
Is that right? So,
I think so.
It must be true. I read it somewhere. So, I mean, how voracious a reader are you? Are you devouring these books that people come up with, and with all these different ideas?
No, I don't. I mean, I read a bit. I mean, I'm not like a voracious but I do. We're just doing a little chat backstage with someone who's putting together like this deluxe package for the first 2 albums called Origin of Muse, and it occurred to me that there was a book I read called Hyperspace, which when I was making the Origin album, I think that definitely was the first time I started thinking like weird sort of crazy ideas and how to incorporate them into the album concepts and lyrics and stuff. So there's been a few bits and books here and there that have probably influenced me, but I'm not like a crazy reader or something.
Yeah, it's just that so many of the records seem to refer to different thinkers and
right.
People's ideas that you then take and run away with. And
yeah, I kind of like, I think 8 albums in, it's like I sort of never really been one to sort of sing a lot about my sort of absolute personal life, everyday things. It's like there'll be a few songs here and there on every album that could be seen as being very personal, but sometimes I think with the music that we sort of lean towards and the kind of music we're into, it suits to have the sort of subject matter which is a bit more broader than just sort of me and my life.
Yeah. I was just interested in the idea of the 3 of you, and when you were young, and whether Matt was saying to you, aged 14, 15, 16, the world's like this, it's a disaster, and we need to sort it out, and we can do it through the power of music, and I've got these ideas.
I don't think any of our songs had any lyrics for the first 3 years. I think if you listen to like any early demos, there's a lot of made-up words and kind of noises, but I think it was a while before, probably not that long before the first album, where I think the lyric side of it really came through. But yeah, we didn't have a PA system, so there was no singing in rehearsals, and then we'd turn up at gigs, and it was like, got to sing.
Yeah, because it's been quite interesting. The last few albums have had concepts around them, and I was just intrigued by at what point you discussed the concept with Chris and Dom, Matt, and whether the concept gets discussed or whether just songs just get written and then.
Well, weirdly, on the Drones album, it wasn't. I didn't really feel like I had a kind of fixed concept as we're making it. Weirdly enough, it was the producer we worked with, Mutt Lang, this like legendary old dude, who we worked with him thinking he'd take us down this sort of classic rock route or whatever. But instead, he didn't really touch the music much. He just recorded it as it was, so he didn't really change things in any way. But he was talking to me all the time, saying like, oh. Like what's the concept? What's the story? What's going on? And it sort of made me go, oh, maybe I should do that. So Drones was the only album where I really sort of, I guess, made an effort to sort of do that a bit more than normal. Other albums have little themes and things. I mean, this album has a bit of a theme, maybe, but I don't think there's really a narrative of any kind.
Yeah. So, Get Up and Fight, produced with Shellback, who worked with Taylor Swift. And so this for many people, this will be like, oh, this is the curveball. This is the unusual one.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you were talking about trying to get away from, say, darker themes or darker sounds, and yet, in some ways, by creating Get Up and Fight, which is a lot more poppy, but it still has those darker themes, but but the music is
it's a constant battle trying to get away from the dark side. But that song was that was one where we just said like let's do something completely different, try something different, work with someone completely outside. I mean, most of the producers we worked with, apart from Rich, were producers that aren't really known for working with rock music. I met up with those. They're really famous producers. Max Martin and Shellback, and they. It turns out they're actually like metalers, they're Swedish metalers. That's what's so weird about them. They used to be in metal bands when they were teenagers, and Shellback actually was in the mosh pit when we were doing the Origin of Symmetry tour. And we played in I think Stockholm, and he was there. So it turns out he was like a sort of closet Muse fan. So those two things there, the sort of closet Muse fan plus used to be a metaler. I thought maybe we might be safe, But I'd say the song that we started out with was pretty mellow. Actually, I'd say it was a song that maybe was pretty middle of the road. It's similar to Starlight in a way, but not quite as even heavy as that. I wouldn't call Starlight a heavy song, but it's pretty mellow. And he just sort of wanted to try and turn it into something completely more dynamic in it and stuff like that, and change the key. And I'm a big fan of Tuvalu. I found out that's how you pronounce it, Tuvlo, and got her to sing on it as well. So that was just us trying something completely different.
Yeah, it sounds great. I mean, and it just sounds so poppy. But I just think, get up and fight. You're still getting that message out. Resist.
Yeah. Okay.
To a whole new generation. No, they'll follow your lead. And then Blockades is the next song on the record. How do you think this fits into the whole of Simulation Theory? And
I'm trying to think. That was one that we actually all played together on the bus, wasn't it? We were all cramped together on the bus. I mean, the demo of it, not the actual recording, but the demo of it. We were all like cramped together in this tiny back of the bus. And I'm trying to remember. It was something that, it sounded more like an older Muse song again. And I think it was one that we weren't sure if it was going to get on there. So we sort of started layering it up with these synths and stuff, making the verses sound a bit more like it fits with the album. But then the chorus kind of stayed pretty much as was. I mean, I think that's a bit of a throwback, really. It reminds me of the chorus of that song reminds me of something like like Newborn or something. I don't know, but it's probably the only track that is kind of like the old kind of style of rock that we'd play, I guess. Yeah.
And in terms of the title, Simulation Theory, I mean, why did you go with that?
Simulation Theory, yeah. So it was yes, the Drones album was kind of very. Let's say, anxious about like technology, artificial intelligence, automation, all those kinds of things. And I guess I wanted to, when I finished that tour, I kind of wanted to take a more optimistic view of technology in a way. And I think that I came across that theory, Nick Bostrom theory, which is, I think everyone's heard about the idea that, artificial intelligence will surpass human intelligence in the next 10 years or so. But what I didn't know was if computational power carries on at the current speed, then there'll be a kind of point where we're able to simulate the laws of physics, quite accurately inside a computer, I just found that whole thing fascinating, especially because I was doing a lot of VR gaming at the time. I was thinking to myself, I was playing this amazing game called Star Trek Bridge Crew, which I think was a big influence for the Black Mirror episode where they're in the Star Trek type stuff, So I was playing that game a lot, and that game has some AI in it where you're sort of doing these missions and. So somewhere in there, I just found that whole thing fascinating. That maybe in the future we'll be able to explore the universe in a virtual way, in a simulated way, but it'll be accurate in terms of the laws of physics. But our ability to traverse it will be not limited by the human body or time. So that whole thing just made me sort of feel like optimistic about the future of technology and what it could do for us.
And so, do you discuss that with Chris and Dom.
Discuss what? Well, I mean, yeah, the title, which actually a lot of the lyrics in the title came. What's funny about that? And it came quite early on. Because often the lyrics are so kind of late towards we've recorded all the music and then the lyrics at the end. So I think the themes, the title, it was all discussed throughout the process of recording. So we all kind of knew what direction we were going in. We're talking about it all the time, and I think if anything helped shape the sound and connected the songs in a more cohesive way.
Yeah, it's kind of like simulating like a simulated version of the songs. It's like, as I said about these kind of acoustic versions that we had, where the song started from, and then what we ended up with was quite synthesized versions of those songs, and we kind of took that to the extreme with the album cover, where it's like a sort of fantasy version of the videos and of ourselves, and then the videos are kind of all these kind of simulated worlds that don't exist, with us sort of not even being ourselves. So it's kind of, we just use that theme across the whole album really, and the videos and so on.
Yeah, it's just that I'm always impressed when I talk to you about your records and you come up with the ideas behind them and explain some of the themes, and I think, wow, this guy's just so knowledgeable and has this thing so well thought through. And I imagine these brainstorming sessions at 3 a.m. where you're telling Dom and Chris, no, well, it's like this, and explaining it, and then they're reacting and kind of getting.
Yeah, I think also a lot of that. I mean, like working on the song Algorithm, for example, it was like that song. I really, we wanted it to be synthesized at the beginning. There's definitely like a conversation of like, well, how do we get the drums in, and so the song kind of starts off completely synthesized and evolves into the drums, and so there's actually kind of like a sort of, like a battle, if you want to call it, of like, between the organic and the synthetic all the time, and that comes out in the production process, like all the time. We're sort of thinking like, okay, should this be real drums, or should we program something here, or should we use guitar or synth or something? So all the way through the album, there's this sort of battle taking place between sort of the old organic sounds of the 20th century and sort of like what's happening in music now, which is essentially the age of the coder and the programmer. Like most music is made by one person on a laptop. The actual idea of a band or group of people making music together is becoming very rare.
And it's interesting that you do work with different producers, and yet 8 albums in, you're really on top of production and could do it all yourselves in many ways, I'm sure. That you have an interest in production, you're hands-on, you play different instruments, you all approach it and swap around and do stuff. I mean, is that something that excites you about recording? It's not just capturing the songs, but playing around with this stuff that's at your fingertips.
Absolutely. I mean, we love producing as well. I mean, we did like the Resistance and Second Law just completely by ourselves, just with an engineer. But then Drones was with Mutt. But we kind of thought we definitely discussed producing this by ourselves, didn't we, in the very early stages. But again, it's like the thing about trying to get out of your comfort zone. It's like we're like, at some point, let's just let someone else in and just see whether it's see what the outcome is, basically. So. It was kind of a conscious decision to let some of these people in and not produce it by ourselves. But we love doing it. I mean, we're always extremely hands-on and ultimately kind of overseeing and producing the whole thing, and obviously physically working on all the sounds as well by ourselves. So,
Dig Down, the penultimate song on the album, but that was actually one of the first one you were working on. Is that right?
Yeah, I'd say that song really was where that first, because the first version of that song was kind of like the gospel version, if you want to call it. So that's what we called it. It's like on the deluxe version. It's the one we did on Jules Holland. So it's very acoustic again. It was just acoustic guitar, piano, and the idea was to sort of get a choir in and stuff. As I started working on it along with Something Human on the acoustic, probably because of the fact that at the same time I was playing Star Trek Bridge Crew on VR, like something didn't quite work. I wanted to make things more synthetic sounding. So it ended up taking that song in a completely opposite direction as to how it was written. And because that worked, that's kind of what led the way for the sort of the rest of the production process in a way.
And you recorded that in London with Mike Elizondo? Is that?
We actually did it in LA.
In LA, right? Okay.
with Mike.
And who's Mike? Tell us about Mike. And because he's worked with Eminem and Dr. Dre, hasn't he?
Yeah. He that's how he kind of got into music, was like engineering for Dr. Dre, I think. And then worked with Eminem. So he comes from a completely different background, but he's like a really amazing musician himself, like a really good player. He's a good bass player, isn't he? And like plays double bass and keyboards and stuff like that. So it was kind of different to work with someone who's a very skilled musician. as well. So so yeah, again, but like working with people that you've never worked with before, it's like you don't know what's going to happen. It's just like jumping in the deep end essentially. So we spoke to him, had a few conversations with him, and then you're like, cool, let's do it. So and you got to just hope that the process works out. But yeah, it was a very kind of quick and smooth process, I think, for Dig Down. It all got done pretty quickly, really. There wasn't a lot of like messing around and spending months and months and months trying to figure out how to make the synth go something like that. It was all quite quick.
And the album ends with The Void. Is that the sign-off? We are into the void after experiencing simulation theory.
Yeah.
Floating off into space, like Lost. That was the idea for that one.
Yeah. When we were making that, we sort of had this image of like sort of being lost. Like when you're tethered to a space station and you get snipped off and like lost off into the void of space. Kind of like seeing the planet disappearing. That was kind of like the sort of the positive, lovely, optimistic vision we had whilst making that song. Yeah, basically. Yeah, and again, the used a lot of vintage synths from the 80s period on that as well. So. A bit of a sort of early filmic 80s influence, sort of horror soundtrack influence as well.
Yeah, and that closes the record. But of course, if you get the deluxe, super deluxe versions, you get all this other side of what you've been doing, which is interesting, isn't it? Because you get from the acoustic ideas that you started with into the new reality, the virtual reality, which you could say is the finished album in a way.
Yeah. I mean, the old versions are all of them. Sort of, some of them are probably better or as good as the original or the other versions, if you like. I love them all, And so I like, for example, Dig Down. I love both ways. What was the other one? Dark Side as well. Dark Side when originally sort of wrote the chords for it. Anyway, it sounded like a very sort of mellow, kind of bit classical piano type thing. But yeah, again, love both versions. So I think it's good that with no limitations of CD size or how much music you can get on a CD, it's nice to be able to just put out a larger amount of material now.
I thought it'd be interesting, because we've got the three of you together, to go back in time and ask you about your first impressions of each other when you first met as teenagers. Because I love that little bit you mentioned earlier on about Dom calling around to your house, Matt, when you weren't even there to play on your Amiga. And I just wondered if you had, because obviously you've spent so much time together over the years, can you recall when you actually first met each other? I'm interested in Chris being in the year below, thinking, who are these two guys? Did they make any impression? Did you know who they were?
I think the first time I met Matt was the football court at Winterbourne. And I can remember thinking he was a terrible footballer.
Yeah, and I remember him being a great footballer and thinking, well, I want to be on his team. So, yeah.
I can't actually remember the first time I met Dom. I think it was probably like one of the early fixed penalty Gothic Plague gigs.
Because you were in different bands.
I remember he had like funny blonde hair, funny long blonde hair. He looked very pretty.
Not anymore.
Still.
I think we're all probably quite different. We're all quite different people, quite different kids in some ways. We had the common interest of music eventually, but, like Chris was very into sports. I certainly wasn't. You were kind of in the middle somewhere.
I was interested in sports, but I was crap at it, basically. So that's what I was like. I realised music was my way forward, yeah.
I kind of knew of Matt at school, but, seen him around and stuff. But the only thing I really knew about him, that he was definitely a good musician, because we'd like play at like the school assemblies and stuff, in front of all the kids, every now and again, like music competitions or whatever. So I saw he was a great musician, and our guitarist in our band was, didn't give a toss. And I was like taking it so seriously, and so I got Matt in and asked him to join the band. We had this kind of makeshift meeting down on a piece of grass down in Teignmouth in the town where we grew up, and but I just remember like he was just like quite different from us, because I was all like grunged out with like long hair and like DMs and some army jacket or something like that, and Matt had like a flat top with like a pink shell suit on or something. So
Nothing's changed.
Yeah.
I'm back in the shell suits.
We've gone full circle. But so it was like a really different, dynamic of people, I think. But I knew he was a great musician, so I was like, okay, well, you got to join the band. And when he did, I was like, kind of thought, wow, I was kind of astounded how well he could play the guitar and just understood music generally. So then slowly we started to look like each other. my first impression with Dom would, like, I didn't know anything about
grunge, any of that kind of music when I was 13 or something, and it looked like a group of homeless people basically. Like it was like Dom and his mates, they really did they would wear these second-hand clothes on purpose, like weird, broken up, what they call DMs or something, or is that Dr. Martens? But deliberately like knackered ones, that they found in some army surplus shop or something. And for some reason, I thought that was cool and wanted to hang out with them. So yeah, that was it.
And then, so you were in a band. You were in Fixed Penalty, and Chris, were you suggesting that you used to go and watch Fixed Penalty play?
No, we used to do gigs together because
Right.
the drummer in my band was brothers with the singer in their band, and we used to hang out at their house quite a lot anyway. So we were kind of all well aware of each other well before Muse started, and we did all these gigs. Like kind of gigs at the school, and there's like a youth centre there, so there was about 4 or 5 school bands. So yeah, we kind of knew each other relatively well, but it wasn't really until we started rehearsing together as a band that friendship developed properly.
And then they asked you to take up the bass.
Yeah, I was a drummer, and I kind of played a bit of guitar, and I think they wanted a bass player who could do backing vocals. So they pulled me aside. I think I was coming out of my classroom at school. I think Matt's words to me were, "You do realise your band's going nowhere. Why don't you come and join us?" And I think I said, "Yeah, you're probably right. Let's do it."
Wow. An offer you couldn't refuse. Yeah.
That's great. I mean, because it always strikes me as pretty amazing that here you are, champions of the world in a way. You're filling stadiums across the planet. And to think that the three of you, playing at school in different bands, having that conversation outside a classroom, your band's going nowhere, and then you do form the world-conquering band, and it's actually happened. I mean, do you think that is drive, determination, luck, happen chance?
Yeah, all those things. Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, if we were from a big city like Manchester or London or something, I don't know. I don't know what would have happened. Where we came from, there was nothing to do really. There wasn't much to do for teenagers, and so we threw ourselves full on into music, and there was no competition. That's the other thing. There was no other bands, from that whole part of the country. So we kind of were quite isolated, and I think that probably led us to feel like we could do anything really, like to play any kind of music we wanted to and take any risks we wanted to. We didn't really feel like we never really felt like we fitted in with anything anyway. So, yeah, I'd say all of those things that you said, yeah, definitely a bit of luck for being in that part of the world and the fact that we met each other in the same school, yeah.
And it seems that, while being, say, outsiders then, you're still outsiders, and I think that's one of the rallying points of the band and the music that you create, is that it appeals to people who don't necessarily follow trends or aren't part of a gang, but they respond to what you put together as Muse, and that's partly because of the identity that you've created through this chemistry that you have, which is quite fascinating. Because you've never been part of a scene, you came up at a time when you're never part of any particular scene, and yet you've kind of seen many bands fall by the wayside along the way that you've progressed through the years. Suddenly it's like, oh, what happened to that band? What happened to that great new thing? But Muse are now selling out stadia across the world.
Yes, I think staying together actually is I've sort of realised that's kind of that's the thing. You know what I mean? Like, because so many of those bands you mentioned, there's so many bands in the 2000s that were our peers, and we'd play with them festivals and stuff and see them all the time. So many bands, great bands, and they just sort of seem to disappear one by one. And most of the time, it's just because someone fell out with someone or some problem of some kind. So just just staying together in the long term is kind of like, I think I said it earlier, it's quite a rare thing, I think, in this day and age.
We have got a list of the most popular Muse songs on Radio X.
Oh, yeah?
Now, I thought it would be interesting to see how you feel about these songs now, such as Plug-In Baby.
Yay.
No. I mean, is that still a favourite for you? It's interesting, recently you told Chris Moyles and Gordon Smart on Radio X 2 different stories about what Plug-In Baby was all about. So do you make a new story up every single time, just to keep it vaguely interesting?
Yeah, it depends what mood you're in. The truth changes based on moods, basically. But I think
It's still a favourite, though. I mean, that's definitely the oldest song that we still play live now. And so every now and again you get those kind of songs that somehow just kind of last the decades, and kind of transcend so many other songs that we've made. So weirdly, that song, it still sounds pretty fresh when we play it live.
Fresh, very fresh. And there's two. But both stories are correct, actually. I think we told two stories that seem like a contradiction, but they're both true. They're both. Yeah,
What were they?
But I think someone else merged them and made them contradict each other. One of them was that we got the title from an Argos catalogue, which is true. There was some in the back of the Argos there was it was like a baby monitor called a plug-in baby, and I think when you plug it in, like it watches your baby or something. I don't know. Seemed cool at the time, and also at the time I did live in the first. I think it was the first or second sort of apartment that I had when I moved away from home when I was about 18. Was above a sex shop in Exeter, and we had the apartment shared the attic with that shop, so you could go into the attic and see all these dodgy devices, basically. But the reason why that comes out is because it was in that flat that we actually wrote and wrote and rehearsed the song for the first time. Weirdly enough, we ended up rejecting it for the Showbiz album. We didn't put it on the Showbiz album, so it was a really old song, but we sort of reinvented it a little bit for the Origin album. Yeah. So both songs, but I think they're the two stories, aren't they?
Yeah,
they are both true.
Right. Muscle Museum. How do you feel about Muscle Museum now?
Pants. No, I'm joking. It's good. I like it.
No, but it's fair enough. I think you've been around a long time now. I mean, it's inevitable that you're going to think, actually, no.
At the time, it felt great. It felt like we were trying to attempt to do something new, I think, just at the time. But I feel like we tried to bring that song back into the set in recent years, but it didn't stick around for too long.
That's one of the favourite songs on X
Yeah, it's one of the most
Radio
popular
X.
songs on Radio X.
Yeah.
For
Wow.
Muse songs.
Wow.
Yeah. Still,
I love it. It's great.
It still resonates.
No, I'm joking. I do like it. I mean, it's not a song that we really play. We stopped playing it a while ago,
I think we pulled it out for the gig in Exeter at the start of the Drones tour, because obviously that was a song that we played a lot at the Cavern Club and early days. So I think we felt like that'd be quite a nice thing to do down there, because we hadn't played there for a while. But it was kind of weird after 15 years of not playing it to play it again. Kind of took us right back to the 90s, I think.
Was the muscle memory still there for Muscle Museum?
Not quite, no.
Where we got the title for that song is we had a small dictionary, Muse. Look up Muse in the dictionary. Right before it is Muscle, right after it is Muscle Museum. So there you go. Yeah.
Simple. Feeling Good is still resonating with people, and I think it was such a turning point in many ways for Muse, for the band. I think it turned a lot of people's heads, made people reassess how they viewed you, because obviously it's an old song, made famous by Nina Simone, and you gave it your special treatment.
Yeah, we didn't really do any covers at all whilst the three of us were together, because we'd all been in, when we were young kids, we'd all been in covers bands, so we wanted to do all our own music. So my girlfriend at the time, her favourite artist was Nina Simone. She loved, she was listening to it all the time, and I kept hearing that song, Feeling Good, and I just thought that could be with Chris's distorted bass line, that could be really cool,
Yeah, it still sounds amazing. Supermassive Black Hole. Where does that fit in the world of Muse now, do you think?
Well, that still slots in pretty nicely, doesn't it? It's, it's still like, one of the most fun live tracks to play, and it's, that track was certainly us at the start of really trying to do something different in the studio and change the way the band typically sounds, or has typically sounded before. So, but yeah, it's one that's kind of lasted the test of time, I suppose, so far.
Psycho is part of this list, and in terms of being released, it's one of the more recent ones, so it's from Drones. But I think you were trying to get it right for 16 years or something.
It's an old riff.
Yeah, it was like an old riff that we'd play at the end of, the end of Stockholm Syndrome or something.
It was the end of Showbiz, I think.
Oh, really? It's that old?
Yeah, it's that old, yeah.
Do you play that on the radio, do you, Psycho?
We do.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes, if there's a clean edit.
That song we opened the show with that for the whole of the last tour, I think, pretty much, yeah. And it's still a great opener at the beginning of the gig. I can see that song definitely staying around for a while. It's like it gets the crowd going, Yeah, it's good, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I'm quite surprised, actually, by that one, yeah. Because it was such an old riff. And I think when we were first recording it, we knew we liked it, because we played the riff so many times, but I was just like, it's just some, dumb riff or something, but then it ended up being, a really popular track on the album, so kind of surprised, but it's, it's still fun to play live. I'm sure it'll stick around.
Uprising from the Resistance, and that is in there too. How do you feel about browsing it? But it's interesting that obviously as a band, you record a new album, you get really excited about what you've just done, you're really keen to share it with people, play it live. And then does that mean there's a cut-off point where the one before that is like, drones. We don't want to do those anymore. Or you still, obviously, they take on so many different meanings and such different treatments as you play them live to different people in different circumstances.
Yeah, I think that there was. Yeah, no, it's true. When you tour an album, you do tend to, on the next tour, you kind of tend to drop a lot of that stuff that you're doing. But obviously, Uprising stuck around. You know, it's seems to be a very popular song, and it's like the best song in terms of getting the crowd singing live. You know, like it's like I love putting the mic out and hearing everyone sing that song. It's just really kind of it's almost meant to be sung by a group of people, not like just one person on their own. It's sort of more powerful that way. But yeah, it's a cool track. And that was where we produced it ourselves in a studio in Italy, in Como, and and I remember we put that together, lots of layers of things. I'm just meandering.
I think we kind of knew with that one, as soon as we recorded it, we're like, that's the first single. I seem to remember thinking that, so we knew straight away it was going to be an important one.
Yeah. Hysteria.
Oh, thanks. Hello.
How do you feel about Hysteria now? That's going back a while. Back to
I think that's
Absolution.
another one that's still kind of, it's pretty much in every set we still do. And
Chris loves playing that one.
I hate playing it. It hurts. It's I think like Plug-in Baby. It's one of the. I think it went out of the set for a little bit, maybe around the time of the Resistance. And I think there's been certain songs we've done that with where we've given them a little rest for a while, and then bring them back into the set, and they almost kind of feel new again. But yeah, it's been in the set for quite a while now. It's quite early in the set. I think it's just one of those songs that kind of gets people up straight away.
Undisclosed Desires.
Yeah, that was one of the first times we sort of started going down the sort of outside of rock route a little bit, and I'm glad it was a track that we produced it ourselves, put it together ourselves completely. What album was that on? That was on.
That's on the Resistance.
Resistance.
That's good. I don't know whether you're testing yourself or testing me.
Yeah. It's live. It's kind of all right. It's big in Germany, by the way. Yeah, whenever we play that song in Germany, the crowd goes wild. Yeah, it's like our most popular song in Germany. Which is it's always nice to have these songs that really have certain unusual resonances in faraway places, or in different countries. It's like we did a cover song of "Can't Take My Eyes Off You" once, and it's massive in Japan. Every time we play it, people go mental. But yeah, it's one for the Germans.
Knights of Cydonia. Still sounds great to me.
I think that the that's where we first discovered there's some elements of this album. When I look at that album cover over there, I think to myself, or the album cover of Simulation Theory, I think to myself, I don't think we would have gone there if it wasn't for Knights of Cydonia, in terms of this kind of embracing sort of fantasy, crazy silliness, and sort of mixing rock with real synth stuff, and it all being a bit just out, sort of, fantastical and outrageously silly, really, And I think that song sort of was really experimental for us at that point, when we literally couldn't believe how popular that song became. It's probably the best sort of set closer that we've ever had, and it's still to this day is the main song we play at the end of every gig. Crowd go mental when it kicks in at the end. It's like a big build up. But as I said, when we were recording it, we were laughing our heads off. Do you know what I mean? We didn't really. We were experimenting to the extreme on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it does put a smile on the face. But that's a fantastic thing to be able to create while people go completely crazy. Resistance itself, the title track of that album, that still stand up in your view?
Yeah, I think it does. It kind of goes in and out the set. We seem to play that one more in the States for some reason. Again, like some tracks just, get different responses in various countries around the world. But I think that one did okay over there. So that comes in as, I really love playing that track personally, because I like the drums in it. But I like doing that.
It's got that big reverberator thing at the beginning.
I've always got to feel like I've got to convince Matt to do it. I'm like, come on, Resistance, it's great. And he's like, nah, shit. And I'm like,
I don't say that. It's great. It's a great song. I don't say that. It's all right. It never really kicked off live. Do you know what I mean? In the way that I sort of thought it might. As I said, like Nights was the big surprise on that album. So we play it here and there, as Dom said. We play it here and there in places where it seems like people like it. yeah.
Starlight, you've mentioned a few times already in our conversation. I mean, do you think that was a moment, a special point in the evolution of Muse when you created it?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely the softer side. I don't really write love songs very often, you know, and it's definitely in that area, you know. It's probably like 1 or 2 of those every album, maybe at most. So, and it was nice to have one that people took on board like that and really loved it, you know. And it's, I remember actually playing it. It was the first time I really got into sort of crowd interaction. Actually, I think we were playing in Japan, and it's the first time I ever sort of thought to myself, like, what happens if I clap, you know? And everyone started clapping the song, and that sort of, so it kind of, it sort of added a kind of more uplifting moment to our gigs, you know, where people were sort of felt a bit more levity and a bit more sunshine, you know, not just a wave of dark anxiety.
Time is running out.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's interesting, isn't it?
It's still in the set. I can't remember the last time we didn't play it in a set, to be honest. So it's another one that's really stuck around. I mean, we played it the other night in Spain, didn't we? And it feels on the older side to me when I play it, but it's because it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess it's another big sing-along track live. So I think, you know, when if you play a song, the crowd really reacts to it, kind of obviously gets you into it, makes you want to play it again. So I see that hanging around for a bit.
Yeah, it's the first song we had that really, because our first 2 albums first album, did it come out in America? The second album didn't even come out in America, do you know what I mean? But the Absolution was kind of almost like a debut album in America, and Time Is Running Out was the first sort of song that we had that I felt like Americans were sort of really digging it, you know, like, and the crowd really got into.
Time is running out, unfortunately, but we're going to take a few questions from the audience. While we sort that out, I'll just ask about the upcoming live tour, and in terms of, we've run through a few songs from your past. Have you drawn up set lists? Do you have an idea of what you'll be playing? Well, the tour next year, we're playing quite big outdoor shows, so I think we're going to do like quite a long set list. You know, we'll play maybe up to 2 hours, so we'll still have a lot of you know, a lot of the old material as well. And for the first time ever, we're going to sort of think about doing, like, it's really cheesy, but like medleys, you know. so I've come up with this metal medley, right, which is basically like all of our heavy tracks like combined into like 15 minutes of just a blitz, you know. So give everyone all the riffs they want to hear. Do you know what I mean? So we might do like sort of little things like that. So to try and sort of get more songs into the set list without it becoming like, say, 3 hours, because after like 2 hours I'm knackered, you know what I mean? So I'll try and squeeze as much as we can into that 2 hours, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the idea of being tired, when you watch you on stage, it's a very physical show. I mean, all 3 of you are working ridiculously hard, and you must feel knackered. I mean, do you all 3 have that moment where it's like, oh no, I can't go on?
I don't think so. I think sometimes maybe the half an hour before a show, you know, when you're in the middle of a tour, you kind of, you know, maybe sometimes feel like you just don't want to do it because you haven't got the energy, you know. So you don't sleep that well on tour sometimes. But I think the minute you get on stage, that kind of just goes away. I don't know why. You just kind of forget that you're tired, or you forget that you're ill, or whatever it is that's wrong. You know, it's the power of rock.
Yeah, that's what we call it, the power of rock. So if you've got a cold, I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, but if I went and did a gig, I'll be completely cured right now. If you've got a hangover, it's gone at the end of a gig.
These 2 are like super fit now. You know what I mean? Like, they always have been fit, but like they're like fit. Like they're ready to take their shirts off on stage, basically. That's pretty much where it's like no, it's true. It's true.
I don't know why you want to see that so much, Matt.
These 2 are like down the gym every other day. Do you know what I mean? Like pumping iron and stuff. So like, you know, I'm in the gym a little bit, but I'm a bit more lazy. But I think we're probably like fitter now than we were when we were 25. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, amazing. Right, I think we're going to get a couple of questions. Anybody? That guy there with a check shirt.
Hello.
The metal medley sounds like it's going to be mental. People are going to love that, so great thinking. My question is about the new live show. Do you plan on playing any of the upcoming album's deluxe tracks?
I think, I think the Dig Down gospel version is probably what we'd go with for the show next year, because we've played the kind of the other version for the last 2 years quite a lot, and so that might be like the kind of acoustic moment in the gig, if you know what I mean, where we break it down and just play that version on the piano or something. Might get Chris on the acoustic guitar maybe or something. Yeah.
Excellent. Just trying to work out how many more questions we can take. A couple more. I'm going to go So no, I feel responsible now. Like I feel like a.
Shall I pick? How about you right here down the front?
Dom's chosen.
Yeah, there you go. Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Right. Considering your passion for classical music, have you ever thought of making a one-off gig with an orchestra, a full-on orchestra?
It's definitely
yeah.
come up, yeah. We got offered a chance, but we couldn't make it logistically. We got the chance to play with a Chinese orchestra in Beijing, and I wanted to get Lang Lang involved as well. He's an amazing pianist, but then Metallica did it, and it's like, so I was like, oh, okay, yeah, we've got the same manager as them as well, so obviously like we could make it, and it went to them. But yeah, no, the answer is yes, definitely. You know, I would love to do an album with Hans Zimmer or someone like that, and take it to Hans Zimmer, yeah. So, yeah. And so I love the idea of doing something like that, and then maybe taking that on the road. So that might be a way of mixing up our show in the future, where because we're doing like a big kind of traditional stadium type tour next year, but maybe in a few years we could do something more like with a large scale number of musicians. Yeah.
So I think we've got time for one more question. I'm gonna go for
don't want to be
the person in the
responsible for
glasses
choosing the
there,
last one.
smiling at me.
Hi.
Hi.
So, when was it you first realised that music was going to define your career and your life?
Well, I don't know. My early, from a really young age, I remember really, really being touched by music and loving it. I think from 4 years old, I was like, kind of like dressing up as like Adam and the Ants, and was kind of into stuff like that, So and trying to play the guitar and. But yeah, early days. I think as soon as the three of us got together, it suddenly felt like this is something that we want to take a little bit more serious, and then realised that we probably weren't going to be able to do any other job really.
I agree. I think same as Dom. I was kind of into music from a really young age, but I think it was like a lot of enjoying music is, I guess, finding the right people to play with, and. That thing, chemistry or whatever you want to call it, when you feel like you're making music with the right people who've got the same ideas as you, and you kind of want to go in the same directions, then it all kind of becomes a lot more enjoyable. And I think we'd all been in bands before where it was okay, but I don't think we ever really felt like it was going to go anywhere. And I think that feeling changed as soon as the three of us got together and started working on our own songs. And yeah, that was when we were 15, I guess.
For me, yeah, probably. I think I've always known from a very young age. I love sports so much, but I was never good at any of them, and so the only thing I was good at was music. So I kind of like realized from the age of about probably 7 or 8 that like this is what I want to do. If someone asked me at that age, I would have said I would have been in like a big band, jazz or something like that, or something like that. I never thought about rock though until I met these guys. Yeah.
And one more question. The person there in the middle.
I was wondering where the decision came from to include a piece of Ennio Morricone score, like in your live gigs. You do the piece from Once Upon a Time in the West.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's a good question. I'm trying to remember now. I think maybe someone said Nights of Cydonia itself sounded a bit like Ennio Morricone. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe someone. Actually, no. It was because we actually made some of Black Holes and Revelations, that album. We made the string parts of the album. I think we did. In Italy, didn't we? In Milan.
We did.
Yes. Yeah. So I lived in Italy for a long time, for about 4 or 5 years, and we made the whole of the Resistance album in Italy. And around that time, I became friendly with obviously a bunch of Italian people, and I started learning about Italian music a little bit. And so Ennio Morricone it probably was just living in Italy basically, and being sort of hearing Italians say like, "Oh, check this out, it's amazing." Yeah.
I think that is your lot question-wise, but thanks for that. That was fantastic. And we just got a few more minutes just to... so Simulation Theory is out. This way of recording, this approach, do you think that is the way forward now? You're going to shake it up further? What do you think?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we do next time. I like the idea of going back to Devon, where we come from, and actually like building a studio down there and doing something there, because we haven't actually made an album in where we come from, So the idea of going back to that might be weird and interesting. So that could be an idea of how to make an album differently. Yeah.
How do you view Devon? Because whenever you read anything on Muse, it's a Devon trio, and you all live in various different places, and have lived around the world, and I often think, oh well, do they really think of themselves as from Devon? Because didn't all three of you move to Devon with your families when you were 10 or?
Well, none of us were actually from Devon originally, so I never really considered myself to be from Devon. I was born in the north, so I don't know. And then, you know, from 19 being with the band and traveling around and going to so many places, I don't really feel like I'm from anywhere, you know. It's just this kind of, you pick things up from wherever you go and you're influenced by people you meet all over the world. So I think we probably all had that same feeling, you know, when we were in Devon, that we weren't really from there, although we, you know, probably went through our most important years of our childhood there, but always kind of felt like outsiders a little bit there.
Do you think that connected you three as well?
I'm sure it did, yeah. I mean, you know, most of the people we knew, or the other people that we were in bands with, you know, before this band, I think, you know, they were all born in Teignmouth, and a lot of them are still in Teignmouth, you know.
Yeah, I think we all had that sort of. I mean, it's lovely down there. It's a beautiful place and everything. But I think we had this thing in common that we all knew we were gonna leave, you know, Devon and travel and do things that, you know, and see the world basically. Yeah, so that's one thing we all definitely had in common. Yeah.
Yeah, but part of you wants to go back there to see.
I like it down there. I love it down there. You know, I'm trying to get these two to come back down there a bit more often. You know, I go down there a fair bit. You know, so still have family down there and stuff. So I like it down there. It's lovely. It's laid back and cool. Yeah, it's totally different now as an adult. You know, when you're a teenager, it seems a bit, you know, it can seem a bit quiet and stuff. But I quite like the quiet now. You know?
But now you're going to be living out of a suitcase for the next year or however long. You know, does that seem exciting? Does that, you know, part of you now must be so used to that. You're thinking, yeah, come on, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, it is exciting. It's still very exciting to go on tour, and I think you know, I think we all still love traveling and just seeing different cities. Still, you know, we're still very much getting to know cities and countries, even though we've been to them, you know, loads of times. But you know, they're often such brief encounters with them that it's exciting to go back and kind of try and discover more. So, yeah, I personally still love it. You know, we still love playing and you know, and traveling's fine. Yeah.
Congratulations on Simulation Theory. Thank you very much for taking time out of your ridiculous schedules to be with us all here today.
Thank you.
And it's been fantastic to spend an evening in conversation with Muse for Radio X.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Matt and Dom and Chris. Muse.
Radio X.